is that you?
If the facilitators at the table can make sure that you have identified maybe some common themes, and we want to pick up the verbatim comments. So if you wrote down your individual comments, if the facilitators would gather those together, if you haven't already, so we can capture those. And I see some people have already moved to solutions, so we'll get some more time for that. But the issues we want to get out first. And if you would just raise your hand up with those cards, so we can get those collected if we haven't collected them yet. Facilitators, hang on to yours first. Facilitators, hang on to yours if you haven't, if your hand has been. Okay. All right, let's just collect them all. But is there anybody that there was something at your table that you want to make sure gets on the table very quickly? Anything at your table that really was a common theme, maybe with the other folks at the table that we haven't heard yet, that we want to get on the table as a potential issue that just to cover?
I think it might be some things that we heard already. But one of our common themes was diversity in the police force, and making sure that the police department, or the African American and different cultural aspect, and women as well, are captured to reflect what's in the community, and also to really encourage or to really support the Black Police Officers Association, because I know personally they do a lot of work in the community amongst the people. And also, I think another one that we were really focused in on was what's going to be the hiring process in this recruiting class of 50. How are we going to ensure that they're going to be, I mean, aside from the scores and so on and so forth, but those who qualify of African Americans or other different cultural groups, how do we make sure that they have a fair shot at getting in on getting into that recruiting class and actually becoming police officers? So that was a concern of us, and how much involvement does the police union have in making that happen or not happen? So those were the examples.
Thank Pastor Bruce and his group table there. Thank you. Anyone else, something that came up at your table you want to make sure gets out very quickly?
Young men. And one thing that was not talked about that the young men brought up was the issue of negative publicity and the lack of social media etiquette from our law enforcement or our associations, and how that's an issue. That it provokes a lot of the negative in the North Omaha or the South Omaha community, but it's not balanced. Was one of the things. And the second thing that was talked about was the lack of educating. Like, it's really awesome that the associations and the police officers are going out and doing football, soccer, but coming into those schools and educating them on rights as citizens and young adults needed more in the classroom for the young men.
All right, let's thank those first two groups for reporting out. Thank you. We won't get to every table at the time, but if there's any very quick comments that we want to get on the table.
Thanks, Lee. One of the things that we brought up was the unheard voice of the prison population. When we're talking about improvement in the community and in the neighborhoods, we have a confined population that's going to come back into the community. And there should be more community awareness for how the community can support these individuals so that their reentry and their transition back into prison is more successful, and they can become an advocate to our initiatives and to our improvements rather than a deficit. And also more cohesiveness among those that are serving this population, and that cohesiveness will happen with more community awareness and more community involvement.
Let's thank that group for reporting out. Maybe one other quick comment. Oh, there's one up here. Make me work out tonight.
Thank you. Kind of piggybacking on Ms. Tila's comments, and with regards to the young men in the back there that talk about the negative perspectives and based on experiences and things that they have. Our table also discussed the fact that we need to educate our young people on not only how to respond on those types of situations, but also about the opportunities so that they can take an interest in changing from the inside. Change happens from the inside. So therefore, we need our young men and women of color to want to participate in the force. And in order for them to want to become a part of something like that, we have to make them feel welcome. And my young man here that's with me today stated that, you know, I said, well, what are you going to take away from what we're doing here today? And his comment is that, you know, I realize now that they're not all bad. That they really do care. There's some people that really do care out here. And that's the type of thing that we're going to have to do. We're going to have to change their mindset and the way our young men and women in North Omaha think about the relationship that we have with the police force.
Thank you. One other real quick comment. If you haven't done it, I know some people already started talking about solutions and recommendations. That'll be our next phase. We do have with us some individuals that will talk more about some numbers, so you can have that in your mind, because this is not just a one-time deal. We're going to keep moving on this. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Very quickly.
Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Willis Sanders. For me, with 26 years in prison and knowing very intimately the mindset of those in prison and how that is becoming a mindset out here, there has to be a new thing about this whole snitching paradigm. It has to be a new thing, because if we feel like we are bound or obligated to protect persons who are taking lives and taking each other, then something's wrong. Something is horribly wrong. Because for us, for me, and I live in this community, to feel like I belong to this community and the community belongs to me, if somebody hurts my father, and I know who it is, or I have an idea of who it is, for me not to do what in prison has taught me, and I have to unlearn not to call the guards or the police, I'll leave that undone. And then I don't have the luxury of going to take care of it myself, because I go back to prison. And it's still a repetitive thing, now the next person and the next person. We, living in this community, have to begin to encourage a new thing. And when something is wrong and something is done, we have to. And we can do it behind closed doors or however they set it up, but it has to be done. Because if we keep sheltering and hiding the wrong continues to fester and grow. And those in prison come back out with that mindset that prison encourages, and then things happen, and they continue to happen. It has to stop, not with me alone, with each one of you together.
Thank you. You hit on it. Obviously, in a forum like this, we're pointing at the police, we're pointing at the county attorney, we're pointing at, but we have to point some of this back at ourselves. What are we doing to fix this? And so there's plenty of blame to go around, but there's also plenty of work to be spread around as well. So thank you for your comments. And that's one of the things that we want to do even more of, is hear directly from people that have been impacted by the prison system, the detention system. And one of the things in our previous forum, we want to make sure we've been engaged folks that were previously involved in gangs, actively involved in gangs, families that lost loved ones, and we want to continue to make sure that that voice is at the table as we're moving forward on additional solutions. With that, before we go into our solution phase and spend some real deep time on recommendations and solutions, because we want to take that next step, we've asked Mark if he would come. There's a lot of, so we talked a lot about police-community relations, but what about some of the other aspects? And so we've asked Mark to come and share. You hear this term, disproportionate contact, disproportionate minority contact. What does that really mean, and where do we sit right now in the city of Omaha and across the state? We have a video. It plays on my laptop, but it won't play on the large screen. So if you could kind of speak to something. We'll try one more time. But if Mark could give us a perspective, we hear all the national stuff going on. Where are we really in Omaha regarding disproportionate minority contact? What are some of the things we can do? Let's welcome Mark.
Thank you very, very much. It really is a pleasure being here. It's nice to be asked to come out and to share things that you work with and wonderful people that you work with. And I'm pleased to say I'm the chairperson of the Disproportionate Minority Contact Committee. And does anyone, not you, Kim, but does anyone know what DMC actually is and how it's represented? Well, I'll tell you a little bit. DMC, and it's not just Douglas County, but nationally, there is what I can best describe as a trend of young minority men, in particular, young men and young ladies being detained in juvenile detention facilities. And it's really at somewhat of an alarming rate. You could even say it's almost an epidemic, because what actually occurs, and I'm talking right now about Douglas County, in 2012, we averaged about 52% of all the young people who were in Douglas County Youth Center were African American. 52%. I've been at the youth center for about 6 years, and every year I've been there, every single month, there have always been more minorities in our detention facility than non-minorities. And Hispanics is about 12% of the population in Douglas County, and African Americans is around about the same. So things are happening that's causing young people to be detained. And it's so easy to point the finger at just one thing and say, well, this is what's wrong, and we've got to fix this. But there's a couple of different things that we need to do, and I'll share those with you. In 2012, the DMC committee wanted to take a look at why so many young people were coming back. Our attempt for the committee was, if we can at least stop kids from coming back, we could lower the number of minorities that are coming into the facility. So we took a look and say, well, who's coming back and why? Well, 60% of the youth that came back to the youth center within 12 months, and in most cases closer to 6 months, are young people with IEPs, the individual education, those young people in special education. 60%. And there's a second group, those young people who did not get visitors after 60 days returned at a 68% rate. So those are two areas from the DMC perspective that we were looking to target to get more understanding about why is this happening. Well, the visitor part you can probably figure out. And I'm a parent, my kids are all old, but as a parent, I told my kids, if you ever went down to that youth center, you better hang out, or I ain't coming. I ain't coming to pick you up from there. And I thought that was the right thing to say. And they didn't, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But the truth of the matter is, in my mind as a parent, I thought that was the right thing to do and say. But evidence shows that if you're not visiting the child that's there within 30 days, they're more likely to come back. And the bigger issue, and with regards to our IEP students, there's a half a dozen reasons why students go to school and then leave school and then come back and get caught up in detention over and over again. But some of the issues has to do with learning. We have a lot of young people who come to our youth center who read at a first, second, or third grade reading level. And if I could say anything from a disproportionate minority contact position, please read to the children. Give them a chance when they get to school. Because if they're not read to, and if they're not seeing us read, then they're going to be behind. And once they start getting behind, then we start seeing behaviors. And some of those behaviors is because kids don't understand, because they don't understand the basics. And then the next thing, there's skipping, or kids aren't choosing to go to school, or they're acting out in such a way where they're being sent to the office so they don't have to participate. This year, I've been at the youth center 6 years. In June of this year was the first time in 6 years that every youth in the youth center read at a 6th grade reading level. First time. youth center, through the DMC, we are reaching out to kids. We're inviting community agencies to come and talk to the young people at the youth center, to share what some of those resources that you have available. We have a career center that arranges for Fridays, every other Friday, to have wonderful folks like you, who have wonderful programs like some of you do, to come and share. And not all the kids are going to respond, but you don't need them all. You know, if you have one or two or three, it really does make a difference as we start to get these kids connected to things before they leave the youth center. It's so easy to point at lots of different things. It's easy to point at poverty. It really is, because poverty is really an issue with a lot of the young people who come to the youth center. But I tell you, and I think I'm close to my time, I tell you, detention is really a symptom. It's a symptom of something that's not going right. And, you know, we're trying to put together alternatives to detention to make sure that young people aren't having to stay there. But when kids are going home, or if they're going back to school, there really needs to be some level of intervention to make sure that they feel confident about their next horizon that they have to go over.
That's right.
And you know, the DMC committee, we meet the last Wednesday of each month at the Juvenile Assessment Center. And if any of you are so inclined to come and see at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock in the morning, to see how we engage. We certainly like the opportunity to have you. I just said one last piece, if I may. When we're talking about young people being detained, just remember, you know, law enforcement isn't just trying to throw kids in detention. They're not. And it is so important, and I've been director of a lot of places, and it's so important as adults that we're not saying negative things about law enforcement in the area where kids can misinterpret. They need to know law enforcement is partners with our community. And we need to make sure that we're saying the kinds of things that's going to encourage that partnership to our young people. The balance is between being detained and public safety. Where's the line? Sure, we'd like to have no kids in detention, but how safe would that make our Douglas County community? There's a line between having kids secured and making sure that the folks in our community is safe. And you know, we're looking to find different ways to address the disproportionate minority contact issue. It's not going to go away overnight. But each day, if we chop a little bit off of it, we think we can make some progress.
Thank you again, Mark. We've got questions?
Yes.
Very quick, because we need to, John, if you want to make your way up.
Can I ask, how old is your youngest student at the center? Or you rather not say?
Well, there is not a bottom with regards to age. We've had young people there that were 8 years old. In 2012, we had 2 8-year-olds that were there. If you're in juvenile court, you can be there until your 19th birthday. If you're in adult court, you can be there until your 18th birthday.
Let's thank again Mark LeFlore. Thank you so much. And there's a specific way you can engage at the DMC level, and if you need to get more information about that, you can speak with Mark. We have one other person that's going to give us a quick piece on, we talk a lot about police-community relations. I'll let him tell you the work that he's been doing. I mean, we really appreciate it because it gives us a baseline back from the summer. Let's welcome John Crank, University of Nebraska, Omaha professor.
Get going here in just a second. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. It's a pleasure to see you all. I feel fortunate to be here as well myself. It's a good evening. The weather's been great for us. We've got a good turnout from that. I've got some slides that are coming out from a survey that I carried out with Willie's help, Mr. Barney's help, beginning about 2 years ago, and then over the last 2 summers, especially last summer, we started collecting data. And this is the data looking at a variety of citizen attitudes towards crime, related to attitudes toward the police, and related to gangs. The purpose of this survey is that we have been slowly adapting a model based upon the Office of Juvenile Judgment for dealing with gangs. You try to capitalize on some. Can you hear this? Oh, we can't see it. Okay. No. Could we go back on the slide?
No, we're okay.
We're okay.
Right, but I've got one slide in front of it, don't I?
Yeah, that's all right, go ahead.
Okay, survey design purpose. Yeah, on several different items I've got here. This is intended to be designed after the Office of Juvenile Justice model. We had a number of items to it. A colleague of mine, Dr. Martin Flood, gave me some advice on some of the items to add to it. Mr. Barney and I spent a lot of time reviewing the different items. And then I had, through the university at UNO, especially the dean of the college and the chair, we were able to go ahead and launch this survey. And we really got quite a bit of information on it. It was very helpful. 400 residents were kind enough to fill out responses to a survey that was far too long and tiring for any sane person to actually spend their time on. So we had 4 broad different areas. But within those areas, we were interested in particular kinds of comparisons. One was when we were looking at what were the overall attitudes of Idaho residents. It was a random survey of Omaha residents. So we were curious, what were their overall views on specific issues? Then we looked at it in 2 subcategories. One is, how do these issues compare when we compare areas where people believe that they have gangs present to areas where people do not think that they have gangs present? And secondly, are there differences in the experiences of minority group members versus non-minority group members? That's an awkward variable to work with because you think about it, minority group member is not in any way a meaningful status, so you wouldn't expect it to hold together. I mean, the only thing that minority group members have in common is that they're not Caucasian, so that should not hold together. I was very surprised that it didn't held together quite well for a lot of measures, and that's why I ended up using it. Okay, so our first concern was perceptions of violence, crime, and community services generally. What we looked at were 5 areas: serious crimes, misdemeanors, threatening behaviors, physical disorder, and lack of city services. We go on. The primary overall concerns, as you can see for this, were just basic crimes. This is very typical of residents anywhere because they're more likely to experience minor issues and more severe crimes, which tends to be a smaller population. You see speeding, excessive noise, and household burglary. Even burglary is a little bit of a surprise, but that was the 3rd most important concern for residents. If we look at residents in gang areas, we saw that they were perhaps predictably, but you don't know until you look at the data on this, they were much more concerned about serious crimes. They were also more concerned about misdemeanors and threatening behaviors. And they also expressed a great deal of concern for absence of city services. We had 3 or 4 different measures of city services, and they showed concerns over all of those. Now, but we had areas where residents had large numbers of children present. We tended, the data was actually very clear on this, that concerns of violent crime and disorder were substantially higher. And something about the areas, when we saw increases in the number of children, we also saw significant increases in perceptions of violent crime as well. I'm not sure why those things hold together. That would be a question to work with, but it was a serious concern. We go back almost minority community members for all 31 measures of crime and disorder, including gang crimes, violent crimes, street crimes, and community services. The collective experience of minority members was significantly and substantially worse. And that number held up across absolutely every measurement we worked with. That's one of the things we can say. I don't fully understand why that works. It's not a variable to shovel together. But it does, and it's very consistent. Now, we also looked at perceived likelihood of victimization, but it's in white, but it's not coming out that well in the slide. But anyway, when we looked at perception of victimization, we looked at 6 measures. We found that perceptions of crime and violence were overall, people were not that worried about victimization, but we do have some particular concerns. Overall, residents did show concern that people would try to break into their house or that people were selling drugs on the street in front of their house. Drug sales on the street was a concern. If we go to the next one. If you look at gang neighborhoods, compared to non-gang neighborhoods, we found that concerns over victimization fear of crime were significantly and substantially higher for serious crime categories. And I've heard it said to me on occasion, which is why I included this, that people who live in gang areas tend to learn how to operate in gang areas, so they aren't really that worried about it. This finding suggests otherwise. If they're living in the neighborhood, they've got a lot of concerns over that. It is a real ongoing issue for them. Minority group status, minority group members were twice as likely to state that they lived in gang areas than can be explained by chance alone. They were significantly more likely to be concerned about victimization to themselves and victimization to friends. Finding was significant and substantial both. Again, the collective experience of minority groups is substantially greater than it was for victimization than it was for Anglos. Concern number 3, residents' abilities to work together on crime-related problems. This is a measure that we look at when we're trying to develop strategies to get out there and work with communities. How well can we work with, can we work with the community overall, or do we need to work with particular individuals and do some training and all of that sort of thing? Overall, collective efficacy on the city of Omaha is pretty high. We didn't have any measures where we saw it to be low. In every neighborhood we looked at, people expressed that they know their neighbors, they've worked with their neighbors, there was some knowledge there. I'd say in gang areas is the only, in gang areas, which is about 20% of the areas that we looked at citywide, indicated gang issues, collective efficacy was lower. They had trouble working with their friends, they distrusted their friends. That was an ongoing issue, so suggesting that gang areas are, the things that lead to the generation of gang scenarios are the same kinds of things that make it difficult for residents to work with each other. When we look at minority group membership, minority group collective efficacy was high. Minority group membership in gang areas were totally different kinds of findings altogether. Active efficacy or the ability to work together among minority group members was the same as it was among non-minority group members. Next we look at, that's really going off the top of the page, that says across the top, attitudes toward the police. So we had 20 different items looking at attitudes toward the police. We looked at quite a number of things, and overall there weren't a lot of clear findings. We had 2 that were very strong findings. One was young people, residents across the city, in a greater sample, young people needed to show more respect to the police. The second one, the query, I asked them a question. Did they think the police were the people they arrested? I asked that for some reason. I've just seen a lot of videos on TV lately that show police takedowns of suspects. And a takedown, if anybody's seen one on TV, and probably everybody has at this point, it looks pretty rough. I mean, it's supposed to be rough. It's designed, it's intended to stop a behavior that was just moved out and killed them, but it looks pretty harsh. So how are citizens responding? The answer is they do not see it that way at all. They disagree with that notion. So, we'll move on.
John, just on this one, because we're going to run out, we want to make sure we get a little bit more time on solutions before we have to head out.
Oh, okay.
But if you can hit these real quick, and then we'll go into that.
Do that. Residents indicated that they felt like they could work well with police, and that police were capable of working well with them. There were concerns that were raised about communication with the police. I would say that if I was to summarize the perceptions of residents and the police, that residents strongly felt that the police could do some work in communicating with them, but residents also felt equally strongly that they needed to do work, especially young people and in all the neighborhoods needed to do work in learning how to communicate with the police. That the capacity to work together was strong, and that when it happened, it went well, but that there needed to be additional education going both ways on that, on techniques and strategies to carry out just that kind of thing. Finally, outreach. There was desire for additional citizen communication with the police, and police communication with citizens. That was across all residents. Support for some sort of mechanism or means to get more ongoing communication about police activities, police practices that was in a neutral, citizen-friendly area. So that's really pretty much, I think we're out of time. So
Thank you. Thank you, John. Tonight was to make sure that we're aware that we have a baseline report. It's still preliminary, and one of the recommendations is that we need to go deeper in the North and South Omaha with the same. There was a 400-wide sample, but we need to go deeper into the minority communities, and we need to go deeper in the North and South Omaha to make sure that we look and compare these notes, because obviously there was some findings that showed and validated the concern that's different based on race and also different based on where people live. So we want to go deeper into that. Let's thank John Kleine and UNO again for that. I see that there's a question, but we're really tight on time, so if we can ask it directly to John at the end of this. But we want to spend the last time that we have together here very quickly on solutions. Specific ideas, if you can bring the lights back up, please. Specific ideas and recommendations that we need to put on the table as we move forward. What specific recommendations at the table, real quick, we want to capture everything. On the multicolored cards, we want to make sure any specific recommendations or solutions that you want to make sure gets on the table. Let's take the time at the tables and have that conversation very quickly. Anything that you want to make sure gets on the table as a specific recommendation as we move forward.